go ahead and get started. So I have a small outline here for what we are going to be covering, and how to use the Thinkorswim platform, right? So we're going to go on a little overview of the panel, setting up multiple watch lists and adding or removing gadgets, exploring the monitor tab and its different components, how to execute trades in multiple products, read the tape, understanding the components of the options chain. That's the the bread and butter of what we do. We're also going to go over general overview of how to do in-depth analysis, including simulations, risk profile, utilizing probability analysis tool, and fundamentals information. And lastly, we're going to learn how to set up and manipulate charts, integrate multiple studies, and drawings for technical analysis. Let's go ahead and get started, everyone. This is the monitor tab on Thinkorswim. Thinkorswim mainly runs on all this, 8 or 9 different tabs in which you can toggle back and forth and essentially manage your your whole portfolio. This is a simulated account, okay? All the values that you see in here are paper money, which are ideal for demonstration purposes. So the first thing we're going to look at is the left panel right here. The left panel is sort of your main dashboard, which it's going to start with your account information. Your account information is going to contain your options buying power, your net liquidity, which is what your portfolio is worth at any given point in time. For the most part, this account info is going to be by default set up on the upper left-hand side of your screen. Followed by that, all these gadgets, though, you can add or remove as you wish. This is sort of the general layout that I have for my portfolio, where mainly I do watch lists, and I sort of divide the watch list by the instruments, right? I have my futures watch list, which can easily tell me where the market is trading even after hours. So just right now, I can easily tell, the market is red, and by how much and what's the magnitude of that. Then I have the markets, which I label the markets as any broad-based index, such as the Dow Jones, the general cash settle index for the NASDAQ, the S&P, but I also bucket in the major ETFs that track those markets, the SPY, the QQQ, IWM, which is the Russell, GLD, gold, silver, and then all the major fear indices, such as the UVXY, which is a derivative of the VIX volatility index, the VXX, and so forth, right? And lastly, I have what's called the common. The common is just your favorite stocks, the FANGs that people call them nowadays, the Facebook, the Apples, the Amazons, any stocks that you are constantly trading around and are your favorites. You can just bucket them into this watch list. But you can, as you can see, you can actually delete these gadgets, right? You can get rid of this watch list, and if we go down to this little plus sign on the bottom, you can add many more gadgets, right? You can add a calculator for you to do easy calculators, although most computers have a calculator nowadays, so it wouldn't make sense for you to have this right here. If you want to use, let's say, level 2 quotes, you can easily put any stock symbol that you'd like, and you'll immediately see level 2 quotes, which I'm going to explain in a little bit, okay? Let's go ahead and get rid of this. You can even do this Trader TV, which I find extremely useful, especially for those of you that may not have cable at home, or may not like to just pay for cable nowadays, because you can stream everything online. During regular market hours, if you launch this Trader TV, it's going to connect you to a couple of channels, right? CNBC US, TD Ameritrade Network, CNBC Europe, CNBC Asia. I usually, stream CNBC US, which gives me a live feed of, oh, there it is. You might be able to see it now. Oh no, market is closed. But during live, hours, you can see the Squawk Alley. You can see the Fast Money Hour on CNBC, and it's helpful because you can detach this little tool or this gadget, so you can put it on a different monitor or on a different screen if you have one. Okay, and it's just fascinating how you can do that. Let's go ahead and delete this. You can add other things such as, live news, which is what I have here. It tells you by symbol, whether it is an index or a stock, what are some of the most relevant and current news out there. So you can, base your analysis on that. If you actually expand or double click on some of this news, it's going to bring this panel, which it's going to tell you the time and the news, for that specific symbol or some symbols in the sector that might be relevant to this stock. Okay, but for the most part, I like to keep it simple. I just like to keep it on watch lists so that I can see a general overview of the market. I can launch as many watch lists as I want. One thing though, you can customize this watch list, however you want. You can just click on, right next to the watch list button, and you can essentially go to public watch lists, right? There's a lot of public watch lists that are preset, predetermined for you, and some of these are popular that people out there are watching, right? And already includes a basket of stocks or financial instruments for you to look at, right? But you can also create your own watch list down here, in which you can call it, anything. You can call it, say, Gustavo's favorite, right? And you can do any stocks you want, or any stocks you watch, or any futures that you like or want. Okay, you can save that, and it's going to save. You can quickly add any symbols that you want or like, and you can quickly delete that as well. Okay, so that's sort of the left panel and how I have it constructed for me to easily see and identify, change in the market or change in, anything that's relevant. The next thing that we're going to look at is the monitor tab, which is, again, your main dashboard. On the monitor tab, you're going to have different subtabs, okay? And the subtabs are going to be things like the activity and positions, the account statement, FX reports, and strategy roller. Don't pay attention to these two right here because they're not as popular. You're not going to find much use for them. Let's mainly focus on these two, the activity and positions and the account statement. The activity and positions is anything that you have current and anything that you have working. This, again, is going to have multiple subtabs, which are going to be, you can collapse them and you can expand them. The first one here is the working orders. This is any order that you submit that is yet to be filled and it's working, just waiting on that mid price or that market maker price to match you so you get executed. So any pending orders is going to be placed on this bucket. Then you got your filled orders, and this is going to tell you each and every day which orders you actually got filled and at which price. It's going to tell you the execution time, your type of instrument, whether it was a sell or a buy, your quantity, whether you bought to open, bought to close, or sell to open, sell to close, your symbol, expiration, again, the type of instrument, the price, and whether it was a market or a limit order. Okay, so all your filled positions. Over here, your canceled orders, anything that you put on working and maybe you change your mind and you don't want to, send it to the market, you can quickly cancel and it's going to be on this bucket. And then this rolling strategies, don't pay too much attention to this. I have never found a good use for rolling strategies, but some people do. Some people do. It for some reason it's easier to roll a, let's say, it's an option strategy with this button, but I prefer to do it the traditional way. Now, under this position statement, you are going to have all your anything that you have working or any investments or positions that you have open. By default, it's going to be grouped on this unallocated sort of bucket, right? And for example, earlier on, I placed a couple of trades on ES, and therefore it's going to allocate this ES under this unallocated bucket. But you can create your sub accounts for your different strategies. And the way you do that is you go over here, see if I can actually make use of this little drawing tool. Can you see the little arrow there?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Awesome. So by clicking on this button right here, okay, right next to adjust account, you can actually create groups. If you say here, add a group, okay? So by adding a group, you can actually name your group for your core set of instruments. For example, let's just say the Dorian Way strategy, right? And you click OK. Now you've created another bucket for your other different strategies. And you can move this around as you want. For example, if we right click on this ES and I select move to group, I can move them to the other group. And now they are bucketed inside the Dorian Way strategy. And that way you can not diversify, but you can have a clearer view of your strategies, because some of you are going to have short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies, and you want to bucket them accordingly. The way I like to do it, let's say, short-term, let's say short-term spreads, for example. I'd like to create some other groups such as, long-term spreads, and so on and so forth. You get the idea, right? So you can now drag each little strategy to its own bucket, and you have them, organized in a nicely way. And by you expanding or collapsing the strategies, won't collide visually with your other working strategies. So that's a good way to do it. You can also get rid of any of these groups at any given point if you click again on this actions in this menu options, and you can rename or delete your specific group. Picking up here, you can customize your own groups as well as your own strategies. Now, let's say that let's go back to this margin account. Perfect. You can also customize your columns based on the financial product that you're trading or the position you're holding. See that, by default, this gives me certain columns such as the quantity, the days, trade price, market change, P&L open, P&L day. You can adjust these columns as you wish by clicking on this little gear, okay? And it's going to pop up this customizable window in which you can remove, select and remove, and you can add from this left panel. You can add things such as the percentage change. You want to see, the percentage of, in the money of your options if you're trading options, and other things. These are like studies or statistics or metrics that most advanced traders use. But as a general rule of thumb, I like to keep it simple, because the simpler your system is, usually the more efficient you are going to be. So I like to keep it quantity for to let me know how many contracts I am holding at any given position, how many days till expiration for that specific contract. The trade price is what I paid for the trade. The mark gives me whatever the current market price for that security is. If you can contrast this value against this value, it's going to give you your difference or your profit and loss for the day, or since you open the position. Right? For example, here, if you open up a position and overall you're winning $100, it's going to show a profit of $100. But if today, for some reason, you're negative 20, it's going to show that you are actually down $20 for today, and net you're up 100 since you opened the transaction. Okay, so let's move on here to our account statement. Now, account statement lets you review all the transactions that you have done in your portfolio pretty much since inception. And the way that you do it, it's going to show you statement for account, blah, blah, blah here. Here at this button, you can choose how many days from today you want to look back. is defaulted to 1 day, but you can, you know, do 30 days or 60 days from today, or even you can select the range. Okay, so let's go ahead and set it up for 60 days, and now it shows you a whole lot of transactions that you have done, and you can look them up by symbols, right? Let's say on the SPX. I don't think I have anything on the SPX, but let's try another symbol, Apple. Perfect. Under, you know, let me just go step by step here. Under these other subtabs, you're gonna have things like the cash and sweep vehicle, and this is essentially a ledger that lets you see your transactions, sort of, you know, tick by tick, what you buy, how much it's gonna cost you, your commissions and fees, the amounts. This is what goes in and out of your account at any given point in time. Some of these other tabs, such as Forex cash balance for people that trade Forex, is not as relevant for us right now. Then we have the order history, which tells us, based on that specific symbol that we have, what, you know, all the positions that we got filled, that we canceled, any positions that did not fill or are yet to fill are going to show under order history, and for what dates. If we go to trade history, it's going to show us only the trades that were executed or filled. And as you can see, it shows us that we've done 6 orders and 6 orders were filled. On the previous one, we've got 0 working orders. We don't have anything pending. We got 6 order fills and 2 orders canceled. The trade history doesn't track the workings or the cancels. Then you can see things like your profit and losses for, you know, each specific product. It's going to tell you in detail, you know, sort of like your ledger, so you can follow more closely. And then again, these are for, like, you know, your Forex account if you trade Forex. And then the account summary, lastly, it's going to expand this little menu, which is going to show you, again, sort of like the information on the account info, but also it's going to tell you how much have you paid in commissions and fees to the broker. And this is really important because you want to be looking at any given point, at least once or twice a year, how much are you actually paying in fees, and whether you need to call your broker to renegotiate your fees if you're paying high fees, or if you're good where you're at. Okay, it shows you how much you've paid year to date. But the main thing to look at, and the main thing I do when I'm looking at the account statement, is the trade history. I want to know, and I want to, you know, given my symbol that I'm looking at, if I want to go back to a certain transaction that I did, maybe I don't know how much I paid for it, maybe I did a spread on it and I just didn't remember for how much I sold. This is a quick way of going back and telling, okay, so I bought 100 shares of Apple at, you know, 116.53, and then I sold the 100 shares at 116.21. So I actually had a loss of, you know, about, you know, 20 something cents, 26 cents or so. It tells you the execution times, and this is a good way of going back. Now, moving on here to the trade tab. The trade tab is where all the executions happen. This is where you will execute your trades, look for your symbols, create your strategies, and so on and so forth. And the main components of the trade tab are going to be all these sub tabs right here, which it goes all products. You can only do Forex trader for those Forex traders. This is a good way of actually looking at different currencies, the euro versus the dollar, Australian dollar versus the US dollar, dollar against the Japanese yen, and essentially is a hot button, and it lets you see nice and clearer and wider what your quotes are, so you can quickly buy, you know, a lot of lots or not with a click of a button. Okay, if you click this button, it's going to then create your order entry tool, which we're going to discuss in a little bit, but it's just a nicer way of doing that for some people. Okay, then we got the future trader, which is essentially the same thing, but for people that trade futures, right? It allows you to, especially people that day trade futures. This is a great tool because you can preset for each instrument. For instance, we have the ES, the S&P mini futures. You can preset different quantities, right? Let's say 5 contracts. You see the live quotes here, whether to sell or to buy, or short sell and buy back. Again, with futures, it's a little different when you're trading the outright contracts, because each tick is going to be different for the product. But this tells us right here that for every 0.25 tick on the ES, if I buy 5 contracts, it's going to translate into $62.50 of profit or loss per every 0.25 tick on the contract, if that makes sense. So if I am over leveraged and want to play big, you know, this is a good way of telling how much per tick my account is going to go green or red, okay? And also tells us our margin requirement. Moving on into the active trader, this is again very useful for those day traders. That allows you to view the sort of the chart for the instrument, okay? And also you'll have this panel right here in which you can buy or sell the product at the market. You will have this little tool, which is sort of like the level 2, and it's basically showing you for each different strike or different price what the bid size or the ask size. This is the sellers on this area, how many sellers, how many buyers for each different price, and it's sort of like a tug of war, right? They're trying to bring these prices down or up, and these is the volume in which you'll see for certain prices people are willing to bid more or sell more against those prices, or for some there's just really not so much volume, not so much liquidity. This is a good way of telling, and you can have multiple charts here for multiple products, okay? And you can sort of, you know, it's really useful for some day traders. Moving on into pairs traders, this is for, again, most advanced traders, in which you can contrast one product against the other, such as, you know, the example that O'Brien was giving us the other day with gold and silver, if you'd like to, you know, play pairs that way, or some other, you know, type of instruments, right? This is a good tool. I don't personally use it. I mainly use the all products tab, which, yep, you can do pretty much everything from here, okay? Let's just move on to all products, and let's go again to our Portic Apple, in which we're doing all the demonstrations. Or you can do any stock you want, right? But when we move down, then we have the underlying subtab, okay? And the underlying subtab, you can again expand and collapse, and this is going to give you sort of what it's called the tape, right? Or when O'Brien says reading the tape. So reading the tape is really actually, if we then again expand this a little more, we can see the key metrics of any given product at any given time. The first thing that we're going to look at is the last price. So what was last traded at? Well, we're going to see the net change, and then this net change is based in dollars, and it's based on the previous close. You know, today Apple closed $3.41 relative to yesterday's close. It's going to give us real quick what the bid and ask is for that specific product. It's going to give us the size, and this size is again the bid and ask. Here it says that at any given point, there were 21 bids at this price, and then 8 offers at this ask, okay? The volume, this is a good measure of liquidity in the security, and this tells us how many shares have exchanged hands and have actually traded for the day. Again, most of these, you know, large cap stocks are gonna have huge liquidity, because they're very popular and they trade in the millions. See, 155 million shares traded today for Apple. You know, nothing out of the ordinary for a stock of this magnitude. Then moving on, it's going to give us the open. Okay, the open for today, Apple opened at 115.23. The high for the stock was 116 on the dot, and then the low was 112.04. Then you can see other metrics such as what was the last size. So last you know, size that people bought or sold, you know, the stock. The yield. The yield is it's referring to the dividend yield. And you can see the dividend actually right here, that Apple apparently pays a dividend of 0.25. Again, these numbers, some of these numbers may be accurate, some of these may not be. Number one, because we're in naughty market hours, and number two, because we're doing in a simulated account. If we're in a real account, this will give us pretty accurate numbers. So according to this data, it's telling us that Apple gives a 20-cent dividend per share, and that's per quarter. On the dividend frequency, Q is quarters. Some of them are going to be biannually, every 6 months, but for the most part are going to be quarterly. So to get this yield, all you have to do is multiply this number by 4, which 4 quarters in a year, divided by the actual price of the stock, and then you get the yield. It's going to give us the PE ratio, which is price to earnings. This is essentially how much, this is a good metric for valuing how much is the stock trading relative to its earnings, or sometimes the forward-looking earnings. So if a company is expected to generate this much in annual revenues or annual sales, so does the current price justify those numbers? Okay, do they justify their current earnings? And this is sort of a metric for that. It's going to also give us their ex-dividend date, which is the date that the stock starts trading without the dividend. Or no, let me just put it this way: the ex-dividend date is the date that if you wanna, as a stockholder, you wanna get the dividend, you wanna own the stock before, at least before the ex-dividend date, in order to receive that dividend. And it's going to change every quarter. It's going to also tell us the 52-week high, 52-week low, and the number of shares outstanding for that specific security. This metric right here, the beta, is the volatility and the correlation to the market, usually the S&P. So the beta essentially tells us how much correlated is a stock to the S&P 500 or whatever the benchmark is, and by us telling that Apple has a 1.315 beta, is more or less correlated to the S&P. Meaning, if the S&P were to drop by 10%, it's most likely than not that Apple will follow, and vice versa. Then moving on into the trade grid, in here again, you can plot multiple stocks to see the level 2 quotes. And the level 2 quotes is sort of like the market maker book, which you can see the highest bidders and the lower or the lowest sellers, and you can see the different exchanges and how much they are exchanging. Okay, I don't use this trade grid a lot, but a lot of people use it. Then moving on, our bread and butter is the options chain. The options chain, again, you can expand or collapse, and if you expand it, it's going to show you all the different expiration cycles. It's going to show you if you open any given expiration cycle, again, our standard options chain, in which we have the calls to the left and the puts to the right. The shaded area represents the in the money for the calls. The shaded area on the puts, again, it represents the in the money, and then the out of the money and the non-shaded areas. You can modify the number of strikes that you can see at any given point in time by simple double clicking here. And let's say I want to see 50 strikes at a time. So now the option chain expand. Or you can simply click on this button, click all, and it's going to show you all available strikes for that specific expiration cycle. In this case, we're doing the front month contract for September 18 or this Friday, and we can see all the strikes. In these, options chain, we also have we also have the option of calculating, sort of. Let's see. There we go. New to this drawing tool, so just bear with me here. We can also modify or customize what sort of columns or information do we see here on the options chain. In this case, I have my preferred layout, which is, you know, things like the net change, the percentage change in comparison to the previous close, some of the Greeks, deltas, thetas, the open interest to see how many contracts are currently open, the volume traded for each specific strike, again, the Vega, the bid and ask. But you can definitely customize this layout by going into this button right here, okay? And you have sort of different predetermined layouts in which, you know, the first one's going to be just the last, and the next, and the net change. You can see things like the volume and the open interest only, or just if you're a guy that likes to look at the Greeks a lot, you can just do the Greeks. But definitely you can customize it to your own, you know, to your own preference. So you can click and remove, and you can add as you choose. Okay, you can add the bid and ask and see sort of like different things, the extrinsic value, the intrinsic value, and it's going to give you your customized view of that. Perfect. So for the type of spread, then this gets into more complicated. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but essentially you can see this as single. So it shows you every single strike for every single expiration, but you can change it to vertical. And now it shows you in a little bit more complicated way, it shows you the spreads already that you want to do. If you want to do a vertical spread, whether it is on the put side or on the call side, and you see that they group them together here on the different strikes. For some people find it easier, and I don't personally. I think make things a little bit more difficult, but some people find it different. And you can do multiple strategies, right? You can do back ratios, calendars, diagonals, and you name it. But for the most part, you're going to be best served by doing singles and sort of like building your own strategies, by hand. And you can also filter on and off about what you want to see, the days to expiration to only show you certain outcomes at any given search point. Now going all the way to the to the right of our options chain, what we got here is the implied volatility. And this is a great metric for each expiration cycle, as we've learned on what's the expectation for those options given the expiration that we have. And this is a quick measure to tell whether if implied volatility is high, meaning that it is, for instance, over 100%, that the options are inflated. It's generally better to be a seller whenever you are facing a high implied volatility, because eventually that volatility contracts and you as a seller profit, right? This also means that you have to be very careful because things tend to be more volatile and can move quicker against you. Okay, but this is a good way of telling. This tells you the percentage of the implied volatility and also the expected move, plus or minus for that specific series. Now, moving on down into some of the other tabs, this is really cool, guys, and this tells us information. You're like a surgeon, right? You're looking at the heart of the patient, and you're actually looking at what the symptoms are, what data there is, essentially all the metrics that you don't normally see on other platforms. It tells us like the 52-week high on the IV percentile, the 52-week lows, all the implied volatility, the volume weighted average price for the stock. But the interesting part is the calls and puts. It lets us know at any given point in time how many calls were traded for the day and how many puts. How many traded at bid or below, how many are traded at ask or above, or in between the market, which is the mid, right? So this is a good way of telling the sentiment of the public towards any given security. So if you see that Apple, normally trades 2.2 million contracts of calls versus just 1.5 million in puts, you can quickly tell that people normally like to buy up Apple versus selling Apple. So this overall sentiment remains bullish. And then again, these numbers may shift depending on news, depending on fundamentals, depending on whatever the narrative is. You might see at any given point in time the puts outpace the calls by 2x or 3x. And now you see that something's wrong. People are betting against the stock. That's a good metric for you to actually base your decision on. Okay, moving on to the options times and sales. This also lets you know what are, let's say, some of the biggest transactions for today. For example, somebody actually, this seems to be like a straddle, right? Somebody actually bought a straddle of the 212.5 calls and then 212.5 puts. They bought 2,200 contracts of each different strike. This is the price that they paid. This is probably an institutional buy. The exchange that they placed the order at, the deltas, the IV, and the underlying where they placed the trade. So, I mean, these people right here, if you look at the size of these trades, you can see that they bought about 4,400 contracts at an average price of 168 and 198. That's $168 and 198. So let's just give it a round number of let's say 300. This is just for demonstration purposes again. So if we multiply 4,400 times $300 that they spent on average, then you see somebody lay it out 1.3 million on these strategies. Again, maybe some hedge fund or some large institutional trader trying to hedge or trying to just speculate for the time being. And then we have the product depth, which again, this might seem a little complicated. Don't want to get too much in this, but it tells you, like different metrics for different expiration cycles and how the implied volatility compares in a scale from 0 to 500% and 300% for some expirations. And that is it. This is an incredible tool, you guys, for just again looking at the market, the options breadth, the information, so we can base our analysis whether it's short term or long term. Moving on into the trade itself. Okay, let's say that you actually wanted to buy something like Apple. One of the quickest ways that you can do that is you can hover over your mouse against the ask, because remember, you buy at the ask and you sell at the bid. So you quickly hit the button at the ask, and it's going to trigger your order entry tool. Your order entry tool is going to be either red or green, usually green when you're buying something and red when you're selling something. So it's going to give you the type of instrument, whether it's a stock or an option. It's going to give you your side, whether you're buying or selling, the quantity. Okay, you can adjust this quantity to buy as much or as little as you want. And then again, this is red when you're selling. It gives you the symbol, the type, the price that you are, or the current price that the security is trading for, the type of order, whether it is a limit order, market order, whether it is a stop, trailing stop, different strategies. But for the most part, people do either limit or market. If you're trading a highly liquid product in which the bid and ask spread is really narrow, it would be safe, and you're a day trader and you want to get in as fast as possible, it would be safe to say that you can execute a market, because if the bid and ask spread is narrow, just a couple of cents, most times than not, you're going to get filled at the, if you get filled at the market, you're going to get filled at the ask, but you're not going to pay a price that is very significantly away from what the last trade was. Okay, but for the most part, and this is a cool feature of Thinkorswim, it defaults to limit, but the limit order, when you see this little toggle on to fix the price, it adjusts the price on real time as if you were paying market, but without the risk of bad execution. And what I mean is, if Apple is is constantly changing by the second, 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, it's going to lock in the price until you hit confirm and send. And once you hit confirm and send, if it fails, well, you got a counterparty that got your trade. But if you didn't, it means that the security moved too quickly against you and your trade is now working. That saves you from having to pay an outrageous price shall the security just all of a sudden, gap up or gap down. That saves you from that. On here, on this little tool, it tells you the mid and the nat. People call it the natural, which is whether you're buying, it's going to just buy at the ask, or when you're selling, it's going to sell at the bid. This is usually the price that they want you to buy at or sell at, but you can set your parameters and you can set it at the mid, which means it's a compromise between the buyers and the sellers, and you can confirm and send and see if it fills. If it fills, that's great. If it doesn't, well, maybe you can be a little patient and have, maybe wait a little bit to see if the security comes to your preferred price. So you can adjust that as well. On this little option, you can put your order, whether it is for today, a good till canceled, which means that the order is going to remain open until it is filled, or it is canceled manually by yourself. You can set for extended hours. If you're placing an order, whether it is on the pre-market or on the post-market hours, you have to select this option for extended. Otherwise, your order is going to be rejected by the system. And then finally, the GTC extended, it is if you want to do, again, a good till cancel on the extended hours. And then the exchange, it is defaulted to best, okay? Which best is actually, it's going to give you the best possible outcome given all the exchanges on their smart routing platform. And here's how it works. TD Ameritrade is a very large broker in which they trade with many different exchanges, and they have a smart software that lets you buy or sell at the most efficient price, or what they call price improvement, meaning that if you are planning to buy this stock at 112.82, and this is sort of like the highest you're willing to pay, if you click best and click confirm send, if you're lucky enough, they might find you a price that is below what you are willing to pay. Maybe they find a way to fill you at 112.70 or 112.75. Again, saving you a couple of pennies. But sometimes that makes a difference when you're buying something. But then you can in some securities you can actually click and select the different exchanges, whether it is ARCA or the Philadelphia or so on and so forth, right? Once you have your order built up, you can delete it or you can confirm and send. When you click confirm and send, it's going to trigger this little sub box, the order confirmation, which again is a summary of your description, what you're buying, the cost of the trade. Since we're in this case buying outright shares, it's going to show us the actual cost upon the shares, our buying power effect, how much, if you will, in margin they're going to require at any given point in time for the position, your resulting buying power for stocks, and then options, okay? And then this is whether you want to buy for a single account, multiple accounts, or for each, whatever account you designate here. You send it, okay? And once you send it, we go back to monitor and we go back to activity and positions, and you see it groups it under working orders. Obviously, because we are past market hours, market is actually our close. This is going to remain working until tomorrow. Tomorrow when the market opens, it may or may not fill at the given price. But if you don't want any orders to be open, or you just don't want to, risk having anything unless, tomorrow you change your mind, you can right click and you can either cancel, replace, or just outright cancel the order, and it's going to get rid of it. Same thing with the options. If we now go to the front month contract and we try to buy, let's say, this 115 call again, it's going to tell us that there's a single contract to buy, the quantity of the contract, expiration, strike, whether it is a call or a put, the price that you're paying, the limit or market, and again, your specification here. And here now you see that it shows us the all the exchanges that you can send it through. Now you can have some choices, but you're always better served by doing the best. It's going to give you the better execution. Again, if we can confirm and send, it's going to give us a summary, what you're paying for, what your max profit is. In theory, we have infinite profit on calls. Your max loss is whatever you paid for, $75, your commissions, and the cost of your trade overall. Okay. Again, the markets are closed, so we're not gonna get fill or anything like this. But if we try, just for demonstration purposes, to buy, the ES, okay. Again, this is a little bit more complicated with futures because future trades on a series of contracts, right? So the September series actually expired this Friday, and two days to go. So it shows that the active contract right now defaulted to the December series. But as long as this contract is in effect, you can trade it. So you can right click on it, buy, single, and given all the parameters, you can actually send this, and we'll see if we get a fill. If we don't, it's fine. Looks like we did, perfect. So once we got a fill, again, we go back to our monitor tab, and we go to our specific bucket where we have this strategy allocated, and now we can see that we have a +1, meaning that we actually have a position on and we have to keep an eye on the trade that we bought it at and what the market is trading for. P&L open, pretty flat, but that's how you can kind of see and gauge what do you do with that. Now, briefly going into the Analyze tool, again, we're just going to do this real quickly here. You have different subtabs such as simulated trades, risk profile, probability analysis, economic data, think back, and fundamentals. The simulated trades, you can simulate any position before you actually send it. For example, changes to all, and you want to see, how would this look on the risk profile analysis? You can actually come here and group these positions. Once you click on any given contract, it's going to group them right down here for you to analyze then on your risk profile. And the risk profile is really similar to the risk profile on Tastyworks, in which, for example, let's say that you're wanting to do on the ES on the October 20th expiration. Let's say that you wanted to do a call spread on this or a put spread. I just try to do a put spread at the delta level of a 10 delta. Okay, so we are going to do the 3,000. We're going to sell a vertical put spread 10 point wide. So we sell the 3,000s. We buy then the 2990s. Okay, and sorry, I went on to the wrong tab. Simulated trades. This is where we want it. Sorry, guys. Okay. So let's say that again, we wanted to do roughly the 10 deltas or whatever. We go down into we have to get rid of this one down here first. We sell the 3,000s. We buy the 2990s, okay? And now we have our strategy built up here at the bottom. And when we switch the risk profile, deselect all this. And we only select the vertical spread. Okay, it's going to show us the risk profile for this strategy. Now, this may be a little confusing at first, but what you really want to focus on is on these two numbers, right? The purple number and the blue number. The blue number represents your profit and loss or your risk at any given point in time, and the purple is your risk curve. Because these are options and futures, it's a little different, but you'll see that this may be a little better on just regular stock or cash settle index options. Then again, just go to Apple, try to real quickly here set the example on the 70 puts. Let's just go a little bit further in, okay? Let's try to sell the 80s and buy the 75s for a 5-point wide spread on Apple, and we are able to actually see this better. You can then expand this risk view. There we go. This is what we want to see. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the risk curve, so to speak. So the purple is your risk profile, but your P&L at any given point at any price is set up by this blue or turquoise line, where if we go down into the price, you will see that you'll realize your max loss of $493 given by this blue number here. But as we drag over, and because we sold the put spread, the 80-75, we know that by expiration, if Apple is trading above 80, we're going to realize our max profit, so to speak, right? And it says that our profit is $7, may not be accurate, but then again, you get the idea. This line flattens, indicating that no matter how high the stock goes, this is the maximum amount we are going to get if this strategy is successful. And again, this line also flattens, given that this is our maximum loss at any given point in time. We might do another education series in the future, explain this risk profile more in detail. But for now, let's just move on because we might be running out of time. The probability analysis is also a great tool, which lets you know at any given point in time what your probability is based on volatility and expiration and spreads and so to speak, right? Economic data, again, more for macro fundamental traders who are wanting to see what the trends are in monetary policy, fiscal policy, and you can see cool things such as ADP employment, employment statistics, income distribution, the job openings, so on and so forth, right? Think back, as we have discussed, it's really cool tool in which you can set up your standards for your symbols, and essentially you can look back in time to see a specific behavior, whether it is earnings events, stock splits, dividend payments. You can see how the stock would have acted or act on that specific time series. And then on fundamentals, we can see the fundamentals of any stock or any index, or index don't quite have fundamentals, but in this case stocks. You can see things such as what are the ratings for the most prominent analysts, right? What is the company profile? What's the company doing? What's their business? You can see things like their financials, right? The annual reports, the quarterly reports for profitability, income statements, and things that the ratios. You can see valuation highlights. You can see things like actually the business segmentation. According to this chart, Apple's revenues, 42.8% derived from the sale of iPhones, 24.3% derived from services, and then other things such as the Apple Watch, the iMacs, the iPads, and net cash balance. So this, whenever you click on any of this parameters, is going to then again give you more options in which you can see what the projected revenue is for each different product or service being offered, who is buying, who the competitors are. This is really cool information for those of you that might be inclined towards a maybe a long-term decision or a fundamental macro decision. This is where you do it, okay? And this is how you do in-depth analysis, by combining all this profiles, probability analysis, fundamentals. This is, you know, how you make more informed decisions. Now, moving on real quickly, don't want to spend too much time on the scan or the market watch. Essentially, here you can scan for different stocks or different ideas given your parameters. You can do things like percentage change, the volumes, you know, things like that. We're going to cover this maybe on a later education series, and also the market watch. Okay, but for now, the last thing I want to show you guys is the charting. Now, Thinkorswim is well known in the industry for being one of the most powerful charting platforms. It is very interactive. It's very powerful. You can do many things with it. And the way that you do them, or the default is, this is the default chart. You know, without anything on it, just a plain chart of you know, candlesticks and then the volume beneath. But you can actually manipulate this chart. You can expand it or shrink it as you want to kind of drag it around, see the price. You can also expand it on the expiration down here and sort of manipulate it that way. You can also, if you have a mouse, if you're using a desktop and you click your little you know, the ball on your mouse, it's going to give you different other options, such as a pointer. You know, right now we have the little hand, right, in which we can drag back and forth. But if you select the pointer, now you're no longer able to drag, but rather you have like a sort of like a crossover view here, right, in which you can drag to any time series and kind of see the chart on a, you know, on a more detailed way. You can also do things like the trend line, such as, you know, you can draw a trend. Okay, you can draw a trend or multiple trends if you want for any specific stock with this option right here, which is the, you know, the trend line, and it tells you on a percentage, you know, perspective how much or down you are. You can do things like the price level, which it's like a horizontal line in which you can set up maximum levels for a stock, right? You can set up resistance levels, you know, peak levels or support lines or things like that. Once you have too many things going on, you can right click at any given point of the chart, go back to remove or clear drawing set, for example. You can clear drawing set, it's going to trigger that you confirm, and now you can clear and you can start with a new set of drawings if you want. Okay, but now the main thing here about this charting platform is also the studies or the time frames that you can do, right? First, the time frames. You can set up a 1 minute chart of 1 day. This is the stock behavior every minute. You can do 5 minutes instead if you don't like to look every single minute. You can do every hour. You can do the daily, 1 year, and things like that. But the main thing is you can add studies to it, right? And the studies are things like moving averages, oscillators, things like you know, the popular MACD, the RSI, things that help you combine price action and volume to make more decisions from a technical standpoint. So let's say that most people out there like to use moving averages as a measure of the trend. So in that case, again, let's click on this little symbol. It's going to trigger this box in which all these studies that we can choose from, and there are hundreds and hundreds of studies. But if we type in, let's say, moving average, it's going to give us all the different ones, but for the sake of simplicity, let's go with a simple moving average. You double click on it and it drags it all the way to the right, which all these are the active components on the chart. So now that we have a moving average, that's a simple moving average, and you can add more than one moving average. You can add 2 or 3, and they are defaulted to 9 periods, but you can customize each one of them. I'm going to show you how. If you go to the little gear all the way to the right, you can customize this to, let's say, a 20 period simple moving average, which is very popular among the industry. And the next thing you want to do is you want to color code it because you don't want them to get confused. So you can color code it to turquoise. You click OK. Then we go to the next moving average. and maybe you want to do a 50 period moving average. Sorry. Okay, there we go. 50 period moving average, and maybe you want to switch the color to red. And then we go and we do our final moving average, which is going to be, say, the 200 moving average, very standard in the industry as well. You click, once you have them all set up, you click on apply and OK, and voila. Now it gives you your moving averages, which you can, base your decisions off of, follow trends and stuff like that. Again, going back to the studies, we can add things such as the RSI, which is a relative strength index, and it's an oscillator, or the famous MACD, right, which is the moving average convergence divergence oscillator, which are going to be at the bottom. And this oscillators essentially tells us, the RSI tells us to what degree a security is considered to be overbought or oversold. They have different levels, such as above 70 is generally considered overbought, and below 30 is generally considered oversold. And as you can see on previous behavior, anytime it stays too long above 70, it tends to come right back down. And whenever it is down for too long, it tends to pick right back up. So a lot of people and traders look at this indicator as well as the MACD, which is essentially how the moving averages are converging or diverging, whether the, let's say the 20 moving average is going above the 50 moving average, that is considered a bullish indicator, and you can see it, right here, or whenever the 50 moving average is going or crossing above the 20 moving average, it's now considered like a bearish signal. And you can see that the chart sort of like reacts to that every time there's a convergence. You see the trend follow or the price action follow. This is not an exact science or art, but it's generally a good judgment or a good indicator of future price trends. And then again, you can add a whole lot. You can add bands. You can add Bollinger Bands, Fibonacci retracements, you name it. It's just such a powerful tool, which sometimes you actually need to have a very good computer with good processing power to be able to handle all these charts, because these charts, believe it or not, they clog your computer. They make it slow. Right now my computer is not super advanced, so it makes it a little slow the more studies you add to this. So you want to be mindful. If you have the state-of-the-art computer, go for it. Add as many indicators, as many as you need. You're not going to have a problem. You can also choose the style of the candle. Some people like to trade on bars instead of candlesticks, right? For the most part, candlesticks are going to be the standard, but most people try to, bars or candle trends or Heikin Ashi. These are just different products that you can do. But this is it, guys.